In a world of phonies and cowards, Steve King is the real deal of integrity and courage.
Welcome, everyone, to the new book club. This is our fourth book that we've covered on our book club series. This is a different book club, Walking Through the Fire. The full title of this book is Walking Through the Fire, My Fight for the Heart and Soul of America. This is written by Steve King. Did I say the title right? Because on the cover, it looks like the subtitle is above the main title.
Yeah, that's right. There's also the audiobook version. The subtitle is directly below his name, but my copy, it's like he moved it down, so I don't.
Oh, interesting. So there's multiple revisions of this cover.
Yeah, I guess it's just like the square format for the podcast format.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be covering this book with Gavin Aronsen, who you just heard, famous founder of the Iowa Informer.
Yeah.
And Natalie's here, too. She didn't read the book, though.
I will read the book. I did misunderstand the assignment because usually Justin reads the book and everyone else doesn't, and I actually love these kinds of political memoirs. Like, I've read, like, Sarah Palin's memoir and shit like that. So I wanted to, and I totally will. I just didn't for this particular evening, but I think that it will make a lot of sense because I'll be, like, an audience stand-in. Like, I can ask
you're in for a treat.
To people. Yeah. Oh, my God, I'm sure.
Yeah, listeners may have noticed that Natalie was not on a single episode of the previous book club. So she doesn't know that there are new rules where I don't have to read alone.
I'm really busy, God.
This podcast is your job. But Gavin, you have You've done a lot of journalism on Steve King. There's a whole section on The Informer on Steve King and his career. So this has long been an interest of yours.
Yeah, I spent probably like 6 months covering pretty much nothing but Steve King. And that was, I don't remember the time frame. I didn't go back and look, but it was around the time when he was running against J.D. Schulten. Mm-hmm. And then after he won, which is when all the shit hit the fan for him.
Right, which he discusses in the section of the book that we're covering tonight.
Yeah, he discusses in pretty much every section of the book.
That does seem to be the main theme. Yeah.
This is absolutely what I'm going to do. Like, if I get any kind of power someday, it's just going to be wall-to-wall grievances. You just have to listen to me bitch about everything I've been wronged about.
Yeah.
It's one way to go out.
But I did want to make sure that we mention on mic that Gavin received an early copy of this book. So I just wanted to ask him how he got about, how'd you go about receiving that early copy?
Well, I knew it was coming out, and I know you were waiting for like a release date too, because I saw some of your tweets on that. But
I asked Steve multiple times, when is the book? Finish your book, damn it.
Yeah, I can't believe he never answered either one of us, I don't think. But yeah, and it got delayed, and he claimed that I can't remember the story. I'll have to go back and look. But it will end up getting published on Oliver North's book label. Not Oliver, is that right?
No, Oliver
Yeah.
North. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think Oliver Stone for a second, but I got it right. And yeah, so it was supposed to come out in March. I think March 15th was at the final release date.
That sounds right. Yeah.
But I got it in December or January because Jacob Hall's website, the Iowa Standard, the disgusting far right website. He's a big Steve King fan, and he had the book advertised on his site, and I clicked on the ad, and I noticed he'd updated the site to have like a link to actually like buy the book, and it went straight to his PayPal with like a personal Gmail address. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna buy it. And then I didn't get it, and I like asked him about it on Twitter, like, where's the book? And like a month later, it showed up with the early release limited edition for friends and family label and the personalized message. So
yeah,
it was worth the wait.
Yeah, you received, it's signed, it's autographed. There's a personal message to you about the corruption of the deep state or something.
Yeah, should I read it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Gavin, you will see the level of corruption at the highest levels of the Republican Party that you have long expected. Steve King. So
That's so beautiful.
That it kind of sounds like he does know who he's sending this book to, because like you have long expected for those things to be exposed, right?
Yeah, I thought about that, but yeah, I don't know. I would like to know, but I'm not sure I ever will.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can dive into the book. It has a very exciting opening. The endorsements section is how it begins, which is 4 pages of people talking about how awesome Steve King is.
Yeah, it's like a B-list rogues gallery of all these people.
That's what my book intro is going to be like too. I am totally with him.
Yeah. I will happily write an endorsement for Natalie's memoir in 40 years.
Grievance memoir in 4 years.
40 is what I said, but maybe that. We got Michelle Malkin, formerly of Fox News and also formerly Newsmax. I know she was on there. I think she left.
Yeah, and VDare.
Oh, wow. Okay, so yeah, Michelle Malkin is
a big
super
get.
far right.
She's out there.
Yeah. Louis Gohmert, a Texas congressman, right?
Yeah, like maybe the only guy who was nuttier than Steve King when they were in Congress together. Aside from this next person.
Right, the one right after that. But I did like this excerpt from Louis Gohmert's endorsement. For the few leftists who still admire people who speak very candidly, whether agreeing or disagreeing, you will find plenty upon which to base admiration. That's the target audience here for Steve King's book. Principled leftists.
I mean, what are we if not principled leftists?
Here we are.
Here we are.
So Gavin hinted at it. The following endorsement is from Michelle Bachmann.
I forgot about that crazy bitch. I miss her.
Yeah, she had her. Was that 2012? I think when she ran for president.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was something.
The ones who shine the brightest burn out the fastest, baby.
Yeah. Something I didn't know about her, she signed, or like, it says after each endorsement, like their sort of resume, and it says here she now works at Regent University, which is Pat Robertson's college.
Dean of the Robertson Graduate School of Government. I didn't notice that.
Yeah. That's a cool place for her to end up.
Dean of the Robertson Graduate School of Government.
Yeah. This is really good writing from Michelle Bachmann about Steve King. He brings you into the story of how a nation destroys itself by destroying those who are the strongest defenders of its foundational values.
That's really good. She's a genius. I can see why
Leaves
she
me
is in
speechless.
academia. She's really cut out for it. Strong writer.
After that is Sam Clovis Jr., BS, MBA, DPA. He went to college.
Oh my god. He put his bachelor's degree by
Yeah.
You guys familiar with Sam Clovis?
I know he
know
worked
the name.
in the Trump administration. He's from Iowa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he ran for Senate in the like 6-way primary, the Joni Ernst one.
Okay.
Back in, was that 20, whatever, 16 or 14?
Yeah.
Oh my god, what a disgusting fuck. Look up a picture of it.
Well, you're gonna feel really bad about yourself for saying that in a minute, because he had some sort of surgery go wrong or something. He's like paralyzed now, and he was in the news like a few months ago. I think he's suing some hospital.
Whoa.
Yeah, but I think I've probably seen him in person more than once, but the one time I remember is I drove to Sioux City for the victory rallies for J.D. Schulten, and then Steve King was at another hotel nearby.
Yeah.
And we were waiting for stuff to get going, so I drove over to the Steve King one and tried to sneak in, and these cops came and like they refused to let me in. And I looked in the room though, and I saw Sam Clovis. Actually, he walked by me into the room, and I tried to go in behind him, I think.
Yeah. He might have been at the Trump rally that Natalie and I went to, but I can't remember for sure.
Okay, he is like a tort reform guy, and he's suing for malpractice.
Right, yeah.
Like, fuck you. I do not feel bad for saying he looks like shit. I'm sorry. Like, it isn't his, like, medical issues that make him look like shit. It's his vibes.
It's his soul.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Yeah.
But he says, cancel culture cut its teeth on Representative King, and now conservatives are under attack everywhere. And I just want to note, it was conservatives that canceled Steve King.
It's one of the few inconsistencies throughout this book.
He's got an endorsement from Jim DeMint, former U.S. Senator from South Carolina.
And best-selling author of Satan's Dare.
Oh, wow, yeah.
What?
Which is
Satan's Dare.
He's a Heritage Foundation guy.
Yeah.
Is that like a satanic panic book? I love that shit. Satan's Dare.
I hope it's a novel.
It's a novel.
Hell
You wrote a novel about Satan.
Oh, God, it absolutely rules. You gotta look up the cover. Oh, that's so good. Okay, so it's like blue, and it's like a hooded figure and then like silhouettes in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
There's more truth in this novel than just about any nonfiction book I've ever read, is the cover. Pull quote.
It's endorsed by Glenn Beck.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, it looks like
it's good.
Looks like an airport book by the cover.
Yeah, it does.
And then after that is an endorsement from Bridget Gabrielle, who I don't think I was familiar with. She's the founder and chairman of Act for America. So she is a Lebanese anti-Islam activist. Just the kind of person you'd expect to be in this
literally an
list.
anti-Muslim group called Act for America. What the fuck?
Also known as Bridget Tudor, like the Tudors. Not sure if there's any relation.
And then I think probably my favorite endorsement on this list is Lieutenant Colonel Oliver L. North, USMC, retired. And included in his resume here is CEO of Fidelis Publishing. And I will give you one guess as to who published this book. So one of the endorsers of this book is the guy who published this book. Very short clip from this endorsement. Truth is despised by government elites. Again, quote from Oliver North.
I also want to quickly draw attention to his use of fragging and fragged, because Steve King in the second chapter,
he uses it so much, yeah.
Employs this. I'll return to that later, probably.
Loves to talk about fragging. And then Ted Yoho, who is a congressman from Florida, who some may recall as the guy who called AOC a fucking bitch on the floor of Congress.
That was him?
Yeah.
I didn't make that connection. I even wrote about that, I think.
Yeah, I think I know about that event because of your article. Because Steve King after that was like, AOC said the word bitch in Congress. She's the first person to ever say it.
Yeah, he said she like disgraced the congressional record because it's the first time fucking bitch appeared in it. So I went through the congressional record and found a bunch of other mentions of like fucking and bitch. That's fun.
And she was quoting this other congressman who had called her that.
Yeah. Let me say some of this next one. So this is from the Capitol Hill Chief of Staff, in parentheses, former, name withheld to protect his congressman.
Yeah, anonymous endorsement.
And, okay, I actually had not noticed the his before.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I actually looked up my old tweet. I had asked Twitter about, who could this be? And a couple of people responded, and I wrote them down here in my notes, but they're two women, Sarah Stevens and Tracy Gibbler. So I guess it's neither of them, but they were both former chiefs of staff to Steve King. Although it's at Capitol Hill, so it's not clear it's even him. I don't know, but
yeah, right.
I would like to know who this person is.
Yeah, me too. This shouldn't be allowed. You shouldn't be allowed to anonymously endorse this book.
Because it could just be whoever. Or you just pad out your pull quotes with.
Most books don't start.
Maybe
with
it's like a Joseph Dobrian thing
like
where
this.
it's just Steve King writing it.
Yeah, it's Joseph doing his own reviews on Amazon.
Yeah.
And then a guy named Tom Tancredo, who was in Congress in the 2000s.
Yeah, he ran for president in 2008, I think.
Yeah.
He was the guy who proposed bombing Mecca, or nuking Mecca, I think.
Okay, yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, so you can tell why Steve King is a fan of his.
Yeah. I found a mistake in his list of former jobs. It says here he was a candidate for governor of Colorado in 2010, 2012, and 2014. But according to his Wikipedia page, he actually ran in 2010, 2014, and 2018.
Yeah, it's like a 4-year gig.
When he ran for governor in 2010, he ran as a Constitution Party candidate. So this guy's a real nutcase.
Yeah. He's like a Napoleon complex. I think he's really short.
That's nothing wrong with that.
So,
not a short king. Not a short king. Justin's a short king.
Yeah, sorry, I was going there. I just remember, I wrote about him for the Ames paper when I was interning there, and I remember that being a thing.
Was he teeny tiny?
He had to stand on some phone books when he was giving speeches.
Yeah, he's got stilts under his pants.
Neil Schurer, a former Iowa State senator, is the next one. Something he said in his endorsement is, Steve has led without complaining.
He loves to bitch. That's his favorite. That's one of his best qualities.
Yeah, we've got a 300
he didn't do
page book
anything
here.
but complain.
Yes.
Bitching.
But Neil Schurer is now, he's the executive director of pathtoreform.org, which is a crazy organization trying to bring about a convention of states to amend the Constitution. They handed me a pamphlet at the Iowa State Fair last year.
I love the great PDF editing here too, because if you click on the link, it's just reform.org. It's this separate.
There's spaces in it, yeah. That fuck up the link. And the last one is Kim L. Hertzfeld, who was formerly that guy Tom Tancredo's congressional staff. And I looked her up, and now she's a real estate appraiser, not even in politics.
Her bull quote is really good. It's a must-read for those who want to know how the sausage is made, yet it's written for the common man. King's book is threaded with the uplifting narrative, but the real meat, see,
yeah.
carrying the metaphor through, is the factual first-person account of the backstabbing, double-dealing, and dishonesty of Washington, D.C., even within his own party. King slugged it out with leftists, capitalized, and rhinos for 18 years in the United States Congress in the battle for the soul of the nation. It's a story all Americans need to know. Stand and fight or live on your knees, and all of those are capitalized. Nice shot, Congressman.
Yeah, and that's all the time we have for today, I think.
What does that mean? Nice shot, Congressman.
Like a shot across the bow, I think. Right?
Probably.
Yeah, it's got to be some Revolutionary War shit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of allusions, or is that the right word? I don't know, to like very specific history coming up too.
A lot of like Roman stuff comes up. Horatius at the gate. They reference that many times.
Yeah, and then some Nazi stuff later. World War II.
Yep.
I got some things to say about Horatius at the gate here also. But
obviously, it's not going to be like super exciting content to talk about the copyright page of the book, but I did just want to note that he gives copyright information for 3 different translations of the Bible here.
I forgot about that. Like, you had to get permission to like cite the Bible.
It's used by permission.
From God himself.
From God, yeah, it's gotta be. Yeah.
I was gonna say the copyright's Steve King, but I'm pretty sure it should be like Fidelis Publishing, shouldn't it?
Yeah. There's a dedication to his friends and family for sticking by him while he was being canceled by the media. And then he quotes the Bible verse that the title of the book is a reference to. It's from Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned. Now, my question is, were you not burned, Steve King?
Did you not lose your job?
Yeah. Isn't this like a recollection of how bad you got burned?
It's basically just like one long self-own.
And there's a foreword by Michelle Malkin, and part of the foreword is what they used for the endorsement earlier, the first endorsement from Michelle Malkin. So he's already copying and pasting shit in the first 10 pages here.
Really?
Yeah, like the last paragraph of the foreword is what her endorsement was, which is where she talks about Horatius at the gate. In a world of phonies and cowards, Steve King is the real deal of integrity and courage. If you want to know what a modern Horatius at the gate looks like, this book vividly paints that portrait for you, and hopefully for the generations in your wake. Do you know about Horatius at the gate? Do you know that whole story?
I kind of do now, because I mentioned it in the book review I wrote for Liz Lenz's Substack newsletter. But Horatius at the gate, I have some notes here. And it's actually not Horatius at the gate technically, but Horatius at the bridge. But the bridge was in front of a gate, so I guess that's kind of a nitpicking.
It's printed.
This will come up again in the next section here too with Breitbart.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a famous ballad by a 19th century British historian named Thomas Babington Macaulay, who also at one point served as Britain's Secretary at War. I learned today looking at Wikipedia before recording this.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to read this. This is an article I found from the website thoughtco.com. It's just 3 paragraphs. The story of Horatius is described in Plutarch. I'm pronouncing all this totally correctly, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Plutarch's Life of Publicola. In the early 6th century BCE, Lars Porsena was the most powerful king in Etruscan Italy, who Tarquinius Superbus. Actually, it's Tarquinius Superbus is how it's spelled. Superbus. It's probably Superbus, but
yeah.
Superbus asked to help him take back Rome. And inside, courtesy of Wikipedia here, his full name was Lucius Tarquinicus Superbus, and he was commonly known, I guess, as Tarquin the Proud. And his last name Superbus is Latin, apparently for proud, arrogant, and lofty.
Wow.
So anyway, like Porsena sent a message to Rome saying they should receive Tarquin as their king. Romans refused, so he declared war. And Publicola was the consul of Rome. He and Lucretius defended Rome until they fell in battle. Horatius, his last name was Cocles, which means Cyclops, because he lost one of his eyes in a war. But he was a keeper of the gate of Rome. And this is not me saying this, I'm still reading from this article. He stood in front of the bridge and held off the Etruscans until the Romans could put the bridge out of commission. Once that was accomplished, Horatius, wounded by a spear to his buttocks and in full armor, dove into the water and swam back to Rome. He was forced to retire as a result of his injuries, and after a protracted siege of the city, I swear I'm going somewhere with this, Lars Porsena captured Rome without sacking it. So they lost Rome anyway. It just wasn't plundered and destroyed. And Tarquinius Superbus was to be the last of the kings of Rome. So he did reign for 25 years until a popular uprising that led to the establishment of the Roman Republic. So if that has any, pretends anything for America, maybe we've got a couple decades left.
Yeah.
But,
wait, so did you say Horatius got stabbed in the ass and then lost?
yeah, he got stabbed in the ass. He jumped into the river in full armor, and he swam back.
Yeah, that sounds like Steve King.
Yeah. I don't want to spend too much time on this Michelle Malkin thing, but she talks about cultural Marxists and Saul Alinsky and shit. Classic stuff.
And Michelle Malkin also was her parents immigrated from the Philippines. What was it, 7 months before she was born or something like that, on visa, work visas, I think. But she's of course extremely stridently anti-immigration.
Yeah.
And also I think someone who Steve King likes to make a point of being friends with because she's not Caucasian. So
right. It proves that he's not racist.
Yeah. And there's of course more examples of that later in the book.
Yes. All right. So moving on to the prologue, where Steve actually starts writing his own book. 15 pages in, finally, he's writing it. He's mostly talking about how Andrew Breitbart died, and Steve King, delivered a eulogy for him. And we already mentioned the poem about Horatius at the Gate by Thomas Babington Macaulay. And I'll have a little more on Macaulay in a second, but I wanted to play this clip for you of Steve King reciting poetry. So here's this.
Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his God?
All right, so that's the poem that Steve King recited in his eulogy for his friend Andrew Breitbart, who I have heard died on the toilet.
I heard you killed him, actually.
Did Andrew Breitbart really die on the toilet?
He died of a heart attack walking home from a bar.
Wow. Wow.
Allegedly, but yeah.
That's still pretty good.
So the poet who wrote that, Thomas Babington Macaulay, here's a little bit about him from Wikipedia. India's Macaulayism, by which indigenous Indian educational and vocational customs were repressed, included the replacement of the Persian language by the English language as the official language of instruction in all schools, and the training of English-speaking Indians as teachers. Macaulay's Minute on Indian Education, which I think is a book he wrote, contended that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. When we pass from works of imagination to works in which facts are recorded and general principles investigated, the superiority of the Europeans becomes absolutely immeasurable.
Yikes, I didn't read about that.
That's so fucked up.
There's something that a lot of people that Steve King admires have something in common.
What's that?
Extreme racism.
They're white supremacists.
Yeah. So he gets this idea of walking through the fire from his friend Andrew Breitbart, and it's I guess what you're supposed to take away from it is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You should walk through the fire because what you have to say is so important that you have to just bear it, get through the fire, right?
Yeah. Are you gonna read that quote at the beginning of it?
Yeah. Why don't you give that to us?
Okay. Andrew Breitbart. This is from one of his books, or his book, I believe. He wrote, "Walk toward the fire. Don't worry about being called a racist, a homophobe, a sociopath, a violent heteronormative xenophobe with fascistic impulses. They say all those things about you because they're keeping you inside the complex, capitalized, forcing you to respond to their playbook." So, words of wisdom from the late Andrew Breitbart.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck? That's so specific.
Yeah,
Don't worry about the classic issue that we all have of being called a violent heteronormative xenophobe with fascistic impulses. I've actually never been called that, Andrew.
that's why I wanted to read it. As a racist homophobe, that's pretty like standard, but then he goes on to say that.
Steve does say here that no one has died from being stripped of a committee assignment, losing a primary, or getting canceled. So at least he has that in perspective.
That almost takes us to the first chapter.
Yeah. He does have like a little like good quotes sort of meme image of Andrew Breitbart that I think is appropriate to put in a book. Here, check out that meme. Pretty cool.
Very inspiring.
Yeah. So chapter 1 is called Running Risks. So when I do these book club series, I try to like write a short summary of each chapter as I'm reading. My summary of chapter 1 is: Steve remembers 2020, when people protested the police and Randy Feenstra knocked him out of Congress. Both things happened because of the leftist media, or something.
And already in this very first page of the first chapter of the book, there's really a lot going on here. He starts off by saying, the final weekend of May 2020, the violent mobs of entitled young leftists, black and white, raged through the streets of nearly every major city in America, burning, looting, and defacing all vestiges of Western civilization. And it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And he's, of course, talking about the protests in the wake of George Floyd's death, but he doesn't mention George Floyd until about 3 pages later.
Yeah.
So that's what he's talking about here.
He uses the term George Floyd mania.
Yeah.
So while the protests are going on, he also was defeated by what he calls an off-the-shelf state senator named Randy Feenstra. It's such a fun way to talk about him. Off the shelf.
He refers to himself as like a sacrificial lamb. I was the Republicans' Czechoslovakia. GOP leaders figured if they just surrendered me and a few others to the left, they could appease the beasts and hold on to their own seats. It's incredible. They had no more luck than Chamberlain did at Munich. The brown shirts are on the march.
I don't think that's even the first like Nazi World War II reference. Depending on how you interpret something in the third paragraph of this chapter, he says, if elected Republicans needed a reminder of the price they might pay for defending Western civilization, they got it on Tuesday following this unhinged weekend of broken glass.
Oh my God.
I'm wondering if that like is a reference to Kristallnacht.
Right, yeah.
Presumably.
This is a brilliant rhetorical reversal where the left actually are the Nazis this time.
Right, yeah. In the paragraph before that, the second paragraph I wanted to mention really quick, like there's already a major lie here. He's saying not a single Democrat note protested the madness. If anything, they sang the praises of these anarchists and their mindless acolytes. They were banking on the mayhem to fire up their base for the November elections. Mm-hmm. I mean, that just, Democrats famously, protesting the police and
they were super
advocating for
supportive.
I love that. Yeah.
So he kind of like chronologically bounces back and forth a little bit. Everything that happens in these first two chapters is like between 2016 and now, but in the midst of talking about 2020, he flashes back to 2019 when the New York Times article about, I think that he's talking about the one about his meeting in Austria. Is that the article?
Yeah, he mentions that. Are you talking about the first mention?
January 10th, 2019.
Yeah, that's the one where he got, that's the infamous one where I don't think it's the Austrian one. That's the one where he talked to him for like an hour and said white nationalism, white supremacy, Western civilization, when those become whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And then he like spends all kinds of time, saying the hyphen was left out or whatever.
Right. Yes. So he talks more about that interview later, but here he basically is saying that like that New York Times article is the first time anyone had ever accused Steve King of being racist.
Right.
And so Gavin sent us the audiobook earlier. I have a few clips from that, and I want to play this clip here. So this is how King talks about this article, but also if you listen closely, I believe you can hear people talking in the background while he was recording the audiobook. So listen very closely.
That was the day the New York Times revealed something to the world no one who has known me would ever have suspected. For 69 years, including 25 years swimming with the sharks, 18 of them in the D.C. swamp, not one person in a huge and ever-growing circle of friends, enemies, family, and colleagues ever witnessed or reported even a whisper of me saying or doing anything meriting the devastating allegation the Times reported as fact. To their surprise and to mine, I had become a white supremacist.
That's great. Yeah, I never noticed that because I listened to this entire 7-hour audiobook in the car. So it was like I didn't have it plugged into anything. It was just my phone.
Yeah.
So I didn't pick up any of those nuances.
And I think when we did our Steve King episode of our show, I think I found articles from like the 90s where somebody accused him of saying racist stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
was
like
went way
super
back
early.
on that.
Yeah. I was just thinking of that. I love that he says that the truth is it was far less damaging to be labeled a communist even at the height of the Cold War than it is to be labeled a white supremacist today. That's fucking insane. Like, people lost everything.
That following sentence is great too. Unlike the current witch hunters, Joe McCarthy was pursuing real witches, and I was dealing with a classic narcissistic abuser.
He says he uses the term gaslighters later as well.
He's picking up on the woke terminology.
Someone's been on feminist Twitter.
Yeah, he was talking about Kevin McCarthy there and how like Kevin McCarthy's name is McCarthy. Shouldn't he be more careful about like using McCarthyist tactics? And then like immediately after that, he can't help but be like, the original McCarthy was actually good, by the way.
Yeah, he's very incoherent about that, I think, throughout the book, or at least another point in the book where he's like accusing him of that, but then like saying Joe McCarthy's cool.
McCarthyism is bad, but Joe McCarthy is cool and what he did was good. So
basically,
yeah. Then we get to the old Democrats are the real racist thing. It's honestly, it's not even like worth talking about that much because we've all read and heard this a million times.
Yeah, just like that PragerU shit.
Yeah. This was an interesting sentence, however. Today, as the Democrats see it, everyone else in America is racist but themselves. Which I think could be a valid criticism from anyone but him.
Yeah, he's like the last person.
Oh, here's where he says George Floyd mania. So he pulls a few quotes from a Democratic presidential primary debate where, for example, Joe Biden said, "The fact is that in fact, there is systemic racism." That made me laugh.
Again, valid if anyone but Steve King's make fun of it.
Yeah. And so it's like a bunch of Democratic presidential candidates acknowledging systemic racism, which Steve King thinks is bonkers that they would say things like this. And this was all said before the George Floyd mania made even these unhinged accusations seem restrained.
You see that little jab he got in at Biden there, where he's like quoting him saying something incoherent?
Yeah.
The fact is that in fact, there is systemic racism.
As only Joe Biden could say it. And boy, I hope he tells us more about what he thinks of the George Floyd situation. Hint, he will. He talks about the hardcore racist roots of the Democratic Party, whose prominent standard bearers are Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson. So he's saying Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, hardcore racists. And again, can't help himself. For all their many virtues, both of these men did own slaves. So they're hardcore racists. They're the founders of the Democratic Party. They are good, by the way. I do like them.
I had that one highlighted. He really, truly cannot help himself. It's like you can, especially listening to the audiobook, you kind of just like hear all his thoughts inside his head just spill out onto the page. You know, he doesn't really, I don't think this is probably edited much, if at all.
Yeah, doubtful.
It's just like, I'm sure he thinks this is a brilliant, memoir, but it's just, yeah.
And he compares here the media's treatment of Nixon-era Secretary of Agriculture Earl Butz versus Democratic Senator Robert Byrd. Earl Butz, I guess, told a racist joke on a plane during the Ford campaign and was like lambasted in the media till his death. But Robert Byrd, of course, was in the fucking KKK and was basically given a pass for the rest of his life. And again, valid criticism from just about anyone else.
Yeah.
I kind of really like, I'm reading this as we go, and I kind of really like how some of it he writes. Like, he's like, when he calls John Dean professional snitch John Dean of Watergate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who leaked the racist joke on the plane to the media. Professional snitch John Dean.
Actually, I just saw some like liberal like lawyer I follow on Twitter use that same language, professional, or like not professional snitch, but like snitch, or like charlatan snitch John Dean or something. He's complaining about, or I'm not sure if it's he or she. He was complaining about how he's on CNN too much or something. Nice. Maybe I picked that up from this stuff.
And I just remembered you mentioned Cyclops earlier, and Robert Byrd, he was the exalted Cyclops of his KKK chapter. They have such interesting titles in that club.
Yeah, the Wizards and Cyclops.
Mm-hmm. Steve points out that more Democratic senators opposed the Civil Rights Act than Republican senators. And the Republican senators opposed the Civil Rights Act on libertarian grounds. So that makes it cool, though.
Yeah, it's like the states' right argument or something.
He also doesn't explicitly say how he personally feels about the Civil Rights Act, but come on.
He did sponsor a bill to make Juneteenth a state holiday way back when in the Iowa, was in the state Senate.
Yeah.
Which I did not believe when I first heard that, but it is true.
That was like...
That's weird.
He was in the state Senate in like the 90s, right? So a long time before Juneteenth was like recognized by most white people.
Yeah.
He just wants the day off.
That was long before he spent Juneteenth all day in the hot sun hoeing and pulling weeds and thinking about what it would have been like to have been a slave.
I forgot that was a Juneteenth tweet. What?
That's so fucked up.
I thought this was an interesting statement here. The left has to keep the playing field uneven to maintain power. So he's talking about how they use accusations of racism to keep their, I don't know, to keep like racial minorities in their party and not voting for Republicans. The left has to keep the playing field uneven to maintain their power. And I thought an interesting thing you could compare this to is like a country that would enforce like really strict immigration laws to maintain the dominance of like white Western culture. Like I would consider that being keeping the playing field uneven to maintain power as well.
Sorry, I was distracted Googling something about Juneteenth.
Today, what keeps Democratic operatives awake at night is the fear blacks will see through their well, first of all, of course he says blacks.
Yeah.
We'll see through their crippling paternalism and leave the progressive plantation. That's so disgusting. I mean, he's like right that the party is paternalistic and it's like fucked up. But oh my god,
you really get a sense of like the far right like echo chambers and shit he's been in forever when he says stuff like this without like any sort of like sense of self-awareness about what like subtext that might
yeah.
If you're trying to tell us you are not racist and you are like using terms like blacks and talking about the plantation, you're not being very careful with your language. Okay, so I hinted at this, the George Floyd thing. This is how he describes that police murder. When one police officer, italicized, appeared to suffocate a black man, Black Lives Matter and its allies used the opportunity to denounce the 800,000 other police officers in America as racist. So the video evidence
did
that
literally
we have,
suffocate him.
yeah,
Yeah.
Is he saying he's not dead? Like, appeared to... What does he mean by that?
Well, and this came out in March 2022, and I don't know when he wrote this. Probably like a long, earlier. But he could have gone back and changed it prior to publication, because like Derek Chauvin was convicted of murder in April 2021, sentenced in June, and just yesterday he was sentenced
again
to another like 20-year concurrent sentence for like violating Floyd's civil rights.
Yeah. Well, that's just like cancel culture. Those convictions were like under pressure from the left.
Their example of cancel culture run amok.
Here's one of his friends. Conservative black activist Candace Owens observed, had she made a list of 100 things troubling black America, white supremacy and white nationalism would not be on it.
Thank you, Candace Owens. Voice of the people.
Yeah, he cites this as if this is like a poll that Candace Owens ran, but this is just like something she said.
She is didn't you know she is the spokesperson for all black Americans?
Yeah. Was there anything else in chapter 1 that you need to address?
I think we covered that pretty well. Chapter 2 is a lot longer. The pacing in this book is kind of interesting. The chapters are kind of all over the place.
Yeah, some of the chapters are like 2 pages. Some of them are like 20.
Yeah.
Chapter 2 is called Sharing the Truth. And in this chapter, Steve recalls his role in the elections of 2016 and 2018 and the beginning of the conspiracy against him by the Republican establishment and the mainstream media.
But before that, he starts it off with a quote by Rudyard Kipling, who,
famously,
another example.
Wrote White Man's Burden.
Yeah, grew up in British colonial India, or was born there. And Steve King does sort of address this, but not until chapter 3. So I'll leave it at that for now.
I haven't read that yet. But yeah, again, there's a theme in the people that he quotes here at the beginning of these chapters. I believe we talked about Rudyard Kipling in an episode of the Doe Brain Book Club. White Man's Burden, everyone.
Yeah. I remember that.
What do you think of this claim? Each caucus season, Iowans prove they cannot be bought with big money and high dollar campaign ads.
Yeah. I love how hard he goes to people in this chapter. He goes hard against like Terry Branstad and saying like he almost cost Iowa the caucuses because he dared to oppose Ted Cruz.
Yeah. Were you aware that Steve King hates Terry Branstad?
I remember the Ted Cruz stuff, and he was controversy because he was against ethanol since he's from Texas and in the pocket of big oil and all that.
Yeah.
But I probably followed it at the time, but yeah, he's just another establishment rhino, I guess.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Said Governor Terry Branstad's errant son, Eric.
Yeah.
I like that.
He's got some good. He's just so snide, and he's every chance he gets, everybody who's he felt slighted by, he's felt slighted by in his life, he just gets some jab in on him.
I like the jab at Jeb Bush too.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one I skipped over that I meant to mention when he was talking about the New York Times article. Yeah, so this was an interview by Trip Gabriel, and when he first mentions his name, Steve says, Trip Gabriel, former Sunday Styles editor.
Yeah, that's great.
This is the guy who took me down.
Oh, and I forgot to mention Trip Gabriel still has that in his Twitter bio, which I think is pretty funny.
Sunday Styles editor.
Yeah, Steve's using it to try to emasculate him or something, but it's he's not trying to hide it or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But I one thing I'm doing here is I started a Trip Gabriel mention counter, because if you remember in the book review I wrote for Men Yell at Me, which is Liz's Substack, I mentioned in that Gabriel's mentioned almost 100 times throughout the book. And that's just like between chapter 1 and whatever the last chapter is, 30 or whatever. It doesn't include the appendix and everything else. But anyway, chapter 1, he was Steve King was off to a slow start. He just introduced him. Only mentioned him by name, and by name I mean like Gabriel. Obviously, he hasn't mentioned my first name all the time, but two mentions in the first chapter.
Okay, so Trip Gabriel count 2.
In chapter 2, we got another 13 coming up.
Oh my god,
starting to heat up already.
Oh yeah, I wanted to keep going on that. Terry Branstad's errant son Eric. Hired young people to stand on each side of the entrance doorway, handing out anti-cruise literature and promoting ethanol, which I have championed even before the first gallon was pumped.
When was the first gallon of ethanol pumped?
I don't know. Oh yeah, and I forgot he mentioned a corn-wrapped Winnebago motorhome. That's the
what is that?
Like actual corn, like glued to this Winnebago?
Yeah, like I googled that and I didn't find anything. Like I don't know if he's like trying to make some sort of like color like commentary about like the cornfields of Iowa or something. Or
yeah. Anyway,
that makes sense.
That's not the only story involving Eric Branstad driving and grain alcohol. So Branstad, according to Steve, put the Iowa caucus in jeopardy by sort of anti-endorsing Ted Cruz. He says, if the top-tier candidates refuse to compete in Iowa, because the governor could like tank their campaign, that would be the end of Iowa's first-in-the-nation status. I don't think I buy that.
Unfortunately, it wasn't.
Yeah, he's talking about the 2016
Republicans will
caucus
never
here.
Stop.
No.
Yeah.
We're always going to be, and I think that's great. We should stay first in the nation for Republicans so that all these crazy people will come to my state and you go see them.
They really are the craziest, like Santorum and Huckabee. I think
absolute fucking psychopaths.
Yep. Yeah. They got to keep the pizza ranches alive.
I've been in so many pizza ranches for...
Cruz, of course, won the Iowa caucus in 2016, and King was a big supporter of Cruz, of course. He says, I confess to taking pleasure knowing how glum our happiness made Branstad.
That's a great line. And he goes on to talk about like the blowback he thinks he got because he endorsed Ted Cruz.
Right.
Because all the establishment Republicans like Bruce Rastetter lined up against him. And actually, I missed this when I was going through the book the first time, but he claims that Bruce Rastetter tried to recruit him to primary Chuck Grassley.
Yeah. Which
is something I don't think I've ever heard before. And I totally like missed that the first time I was like going through this.
Right. Why did Bruce Rastetter... Why did he want to get rid of Grassley, and why would he have wanted Steve King to replace him?
I feel like that's a fantasy.
Yeah, like I don't remember reading about that. Maybe that made news coverage, but like I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. But I'm curious. I didn't have enough time to look it up because I read that like an hour ago.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that.
But he says I was installed to his intelligence, and he goes on to like rail against him.
Right. He knows this tactic from Rastetter, and then he sees that it's being used against him. Like they're trying to recruit someone to primary Steve King. So he says here that Rastetter, Branstad, their whole like cadre of Republican establishment insiders are attempting to recruit a primary opponent for him. And he starts taking notes on his iPhone. He mentions iPhone specifically. So please note, Steve King supports Apple. And this is 2016. This is before the Feenstra primary. So they were already trying to take him out in 2016. He says here, the establishment finally found its man. After at least 6 rejected attempts, the establishment elitists finally recruited a primary opponent to run against me. I looked up the results of that primary. I believe he's talking here about Rick Bertrand, and this primary was 64.7% to 35.3%.
You wouldn't know it from reading the book who that was because he does not mention Rick Bertrand's name a single time.
No.
He refers to him as the boss's chosen candidate.
Yeah. I had to find that info myself. Yeah.
Bertrand's the former state senator from Sioux City.
Mm-hmm.
He was also very conservative, but yeah, he didn't mount much of a challenge to King.
Steve mentions Chuck Loudner several times, at least twice so far, who is his former chief of staff and also worked on Trump's campaign.
His first chief of staff.
Yeah. And also he drove a van for like Santorum or something, right?
Yeah. What was the name of that? Does he name it in here? I think he does.
It's like the Chuck Truck or something.
The Chuck Truck.
The Chuck.
Chuck
That's
Truck.
it.
Yeah.
The Chuck Truck. Yeah. So Chuck Loudner, that's a character that we may need to keep track of.
Yeah, and he credits Steve King credits himself for forming Donald Trump in his 2016 campaign for like basing his immigration policy off of Steve King, thanks to Chuck Loudner, who was working for Trump. I think he already said.
Yep.
And like called King and asked like, hey, like, can you do this? And like King was like, yeah, take it at all. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I can see it.
Yeah. Yeah. After Trump was elected, he had a meeting with Steve King in the Oval Office. This is sort of like on the point of his immigration policy being copied. In the spirit of fun, Trump boasted of having raised more money for my campaign than anyone else. This was not technically true, but true enough. What was also true was the response I delivered in the same spirit. I market tested your immigration policy for 14 years, Mr. President, and that ought to be worth something. Immigration was one of the issues on which I took point. We all had a good laugh.
I love the picture right under that, and it is Ernst, Branstad, King, and Reynolds, and everyone's laughing except Branstad is just stone-faced.
Yeah. I thought that was a very funny picture to include after he like detailed how much they hate each other.
Yeah, and he goes after Reynolds, and
yeah, he has unkind words to say about all of those people.
Yeah, especially Joni Ernst, because he accused her especially of conspiring with Dave Kochel to take him down, like deceiving him.
Yeah.
And he talks about going in to like meet with her, and he finally got a meeting with her, and he left feeling good about it. And then he talks about how he like recorded himself like taking notes like about it afterwards. That'd be interesting to get a hold of that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things
He's just
like
he
that.
didn't record his conversation with her, I guess, but afterwards he just recorded himself talking to himself about meeting with Joni Ernst.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what women are like. They are two-faced and they are snakes. They'll all do that to you.
He's got that tape, and then I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but in his interview with Trip Gabriel, he makes a point of saying multiple times, I didn't think to record the meeting, I didn't have time. I know Trip Gabriel also didn't record it. So it seems like recording his thoughts and his interactions with people is like a common thing that he does a lot, or did when he was in Congress. I'd love to get those tapes.
It'd be great. Yeah, and also that Trip Gabriel thing, it comes up. There's so much more, obviously, like I already said, but he dissects that in such ridiculous detail later. It's really fucking ridiculous. It'll be a fun part.
So leading up to the J.D. Scholten race, the general election in 2018, or maybe Bertrand was his 2018 primary opponent. Yeah, because it was a result of his support of Cruz in 2016.
Bertrand was 16, and then 18 there's a woman who ran against him whose name I'm blanking on.
Yeah.
Who he easily defeated. And then it was 2020 that obviously defeats her.
Right. Anyway, he's talking about the 2018 general election here, where the media is like going all out on him because he says racist stuff frequently, of course. And he's got I have a clip of this, but he talks about accusations of racism and anti-Semitism against him in the media and from Democrats here.
Democrats ran ads and got earned media support for accusations that I was an anti-Semitic neo-Nazi. Where did that come from, I wondered? My record with Israel is 100%. What kind of neo-Nazi supports Israel?
All of them. Literally all of the neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
That person he ran against in 2018, by the way, was Cindy Hansen.
Yes.
In the primary 2018.
The following sentence after the what kind of neo-Nazi supports Israel is the first time he brings up George Soros. So contextually take that how you will.
Yeah.
Another one of these like catty things. Bill Kristol's now deservedly defunct Weekly Standard.
The Weekly Standard. When I went to the victory party or whatever with J.D. Schulten, there was a reporter, Adam something, I think, who was writing for the now defunct Weekly Standard, and he was like one of the guys who like really went after Steve King hard, and that's what he's referencing there.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
This is the Austria thing. So yeah, this was part of like leading up to the 2018 election. He met with a far-right Austrian political party, the Austria Freedom Party. And this is really funny. So supposedly the Freedom Party is being smeared as having Nazi roots. And he says, it's worth noting every party formed in Austria or Germany post-World War II has Nazi roots. In short, if a man was to survive the war, he survived either as a Nazi or a very quiet resistor. Therefore, all the parties forming in the political vacuum after the fall of the Reich had Nazi roots somewhere in its past. Remember, though, that the Democratic Party here is responsible for slavery.
Right, yeah. Yeah. I'll have a lot more to say about that, but he brings this up in a later chapter where before the election in 2018, it was like a week before I got actually into this. I thought like somebody from the Des Moines Business Partnership had invited me, but I wasn't looking very closely. It was just some like activist or something who didn't like Steve King. So I go there. I'm like, hey, I'm with press. Like, let me in. And then like I talked my way in, somehow did. And he like was defending the Freedom Party of Austria at length with like similar. I wrote a whole article about it. But he mentions that forum, and that's where Caleb Van Fossen, the Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement guy who paid to get in, challenged him on how he shared like an ideology with like synagogue shooter and talked with this neo-Nazi party, and then he like just lost his shit on it. But yeah, he brings that up, and I think he starts a chapter later in the book about that, so I'll save that for later.
So this meeting he had with these people in Austria, it was just a fun time. So here, like they weren't talking about like how racist they were. They were just telling jokes and stuff, kind of like this.
The gentleman on my right opened with this statement. Congressman, I think you should know that you are seated here with two homosexuals and a Jew. Immediately, the man across the table shot out, "Who's the Jew?" Everybody laughed. For those who missed the joke, he was telling us he knew who the other homosexual was. I never did learn which of my dinner companions it was, and I didn't care. That was the last reference to either Judaism or homosexuality for the duration of the dinner meeting.
I'm always saying that.
I love how he explains the joke, too.
Yes, that's the best part.
As if it's like not fucking obvious.
So it's like he has some kind of reputation, and these people are joking about, hey, just so you're aware, there's a gay person here. Like, I know you have a problem with that, Steve King. Does he think this exonerates him?
Right, yeah. It's like there's an elephant in the room. Let's just like get it down in the open so we don't have to like, pretend. Speaking of Judaism, I want to, since I mentioned him, Adam Rubinstein was the journalist for the Weekly Standard, and now he is the executive editor of Jewish Insider. So, yeah, make of that what you will.
Yeah. So these articles are coming out about Steve King having ties to far-right European nationalists, and this was made worse shortly after that because of current events. For example, on October 22nd, a pipe bomb was conveniently placed in Soros's mailbox.
What is his accusation there?
Right. What are you suggesting?
It's a false flag.
It's like blaming Soros for like having getting like a death threat or something.
Because then in the next paragraph he calls the Tree of Life shooting an actual anti-Semitic attack, as opposed to what? The false flag of the pipe bomb.
Just a friendly pipe bomb.
Yeah, that's the next current event is the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. On that, he says, the left sought to blame the violence on the right. I have a note here about that, the shooter there. According to accounts which were given by, again, this is not in Steve King's book. This is something that I have to contextualize this with. According to accounts which were given by Robert Gregory Bowers' co-workers from 20 years ago, and analysis of his recent social media posts, his conservatism became radicalized as white nationalism. At one point, Bowers was fascinated by the right-wing radio host Jim Quinn. At a later time, he became a follower of, quote, aggressive online provocateurs of the right wing's fringe. He was deeply involved in posting comments on social media websites such as Gab, and he also promoted anti-Semitic conspiracy theories on them. George Soros, of course, was the subject of some of those anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Yeah,
and I'm going to spoil another thing that's later in the book, because Steve King does later in the book, like, basically, like, acknowledge that, and he reads, like, a quote from Bowers. And if you want an audio clip of Steve King saying a slur, begins with K, used against Jewish people, it's he reads it.
Oh boy!
So it's like not like Steve King is oblivious to the fact of like who this guy was.
Yeah.
Maybe he just didn't go back after he learned that and edit the earlier chapter. I don't know.
Ironically, I believe this is the first book we will have covered in the Rock Hard Caucus book club series that does not contain the N-word.
That is true.
Okay.
Yeah. Or I mean, I don't know if that's true. I do know that's true because I've listened to your other book series.
I can tell you
this one does not.
We're 3 for 3 so far. So, so he's sort of saying it's unfair to tie his comments to the Tree of Life synagogue shooter, despite the fact that they were saying very, very similar things. And this is like the reason that leaders in his own party started to throw him under the bus, is because it was kind of a bad look.
And so many times he talks about how like there's never been any evidence that I've ever done or said anything racist, and he has all these like he seems to think that he's making these great points and like really just like exonerating himself. Like finally, this is his opportunity to like really set the record straight. But anytime there's something like alleged against him, he just like completely brushes it off like it's a foregone conclusion. Like, of course that's not true. He just omits any like inconvenient context.
Yeah. And he's claiming like a pretty big conspiracy against him throughout.
Yeah, like super paranoid shit.
Yeah.
Super paranoid, like you are just not that important.
Before I forget, I wanted to, I'm looking through my notes and I'm jumping around here. But speaking of like the Nazi references.
Yeah.
And there's like the broken glass reference in the previous chapter. I'm wondering if this is another Nazi reference near the beginning of chapter 2. He mentions something about then the long knives started to come out, referring to like people like going at him.
The night of the long knives.
There was the night of the long knives, which is like that Nazi purge to like consolidate power behind Hitler in like 1934, where he killed Ernest Röhm, I think, they did. And
yeah.
So I mean, it makes you think. I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems like there's a theme.
He's deeply steeped in Nazi history. He certainly knows a lot about it.
Yeah.
He's a historian. So he then says he was at a rally the night before the 2018 election. Kim Reynolds and Joni Ernst were both there. They're all campaigning together the night before the 2018 general election. He got a call from Kevin McCarthy. Again, he knows that like establishment Republicans were like working against him to get a primary opponent, and they want him out basically. But he gets a call from Kevin McCarthy, and then also calls from Paul Ryan and Steve Scalise, and the NRCC chairman. What's his name? Steve Stivers? Something Stivers.
Yeah, Steve Stivers.
Yeah, so Stivers and like a few other like prominent Republicans had said things in the media about how King, like, the stuff he says is bad. Like, they acknowledge that, like, yeah, he's kind of out there. Like, we don't think it's good, the stuff that the racist stuff he supports. And so he gets these calls from Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, and Steve Scalise. And they all pretend that they didn't know that, like, Steve Stivers had made this statement. But they all just happened to call him that night.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what page you're on. It's where he talks about getting fragged by his own party leadership.
Yeah,
That's the page before. What does fragged mean?
Well, let me tell you, Natalie, because there's a asterisk. I had to zoom in on this in the PDF to see what it was. I thought it was like a typo, like an asterisk, or like a apostrophe. It was an asterisk. I'm on page 33, and you think it'd be like a footnote. You click on it, and it jumps you to page 41, 8 pages later, for some reason, and it says fragging and frag is military slang for using a fragmentation grenade to attack a fellow unit member or superior. I guess it's an end note, kind of. It's like the end of a chapter, and that's not sure that's how end notes usually work, but
it's I think the term came out of the Vietnam War. That's how I first learned about it. It was when, like, troops would kill their commanding officer because they're in the Vietnam War and they don't want to fight in the Vietnam War.
He's just been playing a lot of Counter-Strike in retirement.
Imagine the things that he would say on Xbox.
Yeah, he plays the German side in Call of Duty exclusively. So yeah, shortly after the 2018 election is when Kim Reynolds made a statement about him. He believes that this question was planted at this press event, but Reynolds was asked about Steve King and, like, his racist remarks. And again, they had been at a rally together like a few nights prior to this, happily campaigning together. But she said, Congressman King needs to decide what he wants to do, whether he wants to represent the values of the 4th District or do something else. Which seems to me to be a pretty meaningless statement.
I remember that well.
But yeah, I guess she was signaling.
Yeah, it's basically just like, I got to cover my ass because I've supported him, and now I got, like,
Right.
Oh my God, he includes a picture of her holding a note card, and it's zoomed in. This is incredible. It's zoomed in with Steve King, and underneath it says Steve King needs to decide if he needs to. So it's like a canned line.
She had it planned. Yep.
He loves that shit. In that article I mentioned that I wrote before about, like, the event where, like, he defended, the Nazi roots of that Freedom Party of Austria. I had something about how he, I think it's the same article, how, like, he had recently been invited to a one-on-one Oval Office meeting with Trump. And, like, he had a tweet where he took a picture of his hand and he, like, compared it to something Sarah Palin did, where she, like, write notes on her hand. He had all these different, like, things on it that he's going to ask Trump, I think. Like those zoomed in, like, note card things.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's as a result of his governor betraying him that he says, I was being fragged by my own party leadership.
Right.
Personally, I think he's kind of reversing the meaning of what fragging is, because she's killing her subordinate, basically, and it's supposed to go the other way, I think.
Yeah, you got to kind of... He's taking some creative license.
Yeah, you gotta adapt.
Yeah. And then here is where he puts, like, Dave Kochel, president of Red Wave Communications, at kind of the center of this conspiracy against him. And part of this conspiracy is that Kochel's former CEO, Sarah Craig Gongol, is the current chief of staff for Kim Reynolds. So there's a lot of connections between the people acting against Steve and this Dave Kochel.
You can kind of imagine him with, like, the chalkboard with, like, all the, like, lines going to everything, just, like, seriously, like...
Thumbtacks and red string across the room.
Right, yeah.
And then, like, shortly after he narrowly defeats J.D. Scholten is when he starts getting warnings that the party is going to go even harder against him for 2020. And he says... Well, let me play this from him. I only pulled this clip because he says a word wrong.
I didn't take the warning seriously because it sounded too conspirational.
It's supposed to be conspiratorial, not conspirational.
He's constipated.
So as opposed to everything he's been writing about so far, he thought that the idea that his party leadership might be working against him, that's too conspiratorial.
He does spell it right in the book, to his credit.
Yeah, he just says it wrong. Claims he has no
And he goes on later in that same paragraph.
Yeah, he claims he has no skeletons in his closet. What do you think?
I know your podcast, you like to share wait, what's the word I'm looking for? Unsubstantiated rumors.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple about him.
What are they?
He probably won't listen to this. So, well, one is from, I'm trying to remember who it was. Some guy I met in Ames at a bar. How I meet most people in Ames. And he grew up in Western Iowa. Like, might have known him, or he knew somebody who grew up with him, and claimed like he used to smoke weed, which would be amazing to like rip a bong with Steve King to see like where he goes. Little thoughts in his head. And then I heard from somebody that this was during the Schulten campaign, but I didn't hear it from Schulten, but that Steve King goes to this bar, or went to this bar somewhere in Western Iowa, I forget where, but he had like a habit of like sexually harassing the young bartenders there.
That sounds right. And
I could not confirm that, so that's a baseless allegation. Another example of the left unfairly attacking my former congressman because he represented Ames.
Yeah.
So I stand by him against these allegations that I am bringing forth.
Well, Gavin brought these up as examples of unsubstantiated like attacks on Steve King. Not We're not the ones doing this. We are simply saying this is not okay to bring things up like this, to spread rumors like this.
There is also another one that has made national news, which is the hotel in Moscow. You know what I'm talking about?
Like
the Chinese masseuse.
Oh.
No, but it was like similar. I mean, it's like and I don't love this because it's kind of like punching down like a sex worker kind of like feel to it. But it's he supposedly like called hired a masseuse, like a Chinese masseuse to come to his hotel room when he was in Moscow. And BuzzFeed News wrote about it, and he of course denied it. But I don't know if that'd be a skeleton in his closet, but that's like something that people bring up from time to time.
Interesting.
I guess maybe it's out of the closet.
Yeah, right. It's a skeleton.
That's the only other thing I could think of, but
it's no longer in the closet. It's a skeleton that's out on the bedroom floor for all to see.
It's laying out.
But I have a hard time believing that he has no skeleton, since he probably doesn't think he does. I could see that, but I'm sure he's done something fucked up, like racist, that he thought was totally just ordinary.
Yeah, right.
In his life.
Yeah.
Some kind of fucked up sexual assault that he didn't perceive as an assault, but clearly was. Stuff like that, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know anything about his romantic history or his otherwise him.
Yeah. Well, the secret plan that
saying that would be romantic. Sorry.
The secret plan that the Republican establishment is hatching against him, according to his informants, it seems to involve a chosen messenger is going to approach President Trump and convince him to tweet something negative about Steve King. And I love the picture this paints of how the Trump administration worked. It was just Joni Ernst is apparently this chosen messenger. So how this worked was senators would just go visit Trump and beg him to tweet things.
That I'm sure is true.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's true.
That was his power, like his greatest asset.
Shit posting on Twitter.
Yeah. This is where he mentions he has a 24-minute tape of his thoughts after the meeting with Ernst. Yeah. Because after he heard about this, he tried to get a meeting with Ernst to try to feel her out. Like, are you really trying to get Trump to tweet about me?
Well, did he record that
my
before
God.
he met with Ernst? I think I said that backwards.
Afterwards.
No, it's after. It's after.
A tape of my thoughts recorded immediately after the private meeting, which makes it clear my belief Joni remained loyal and would not. And he just like sits by himself for 24 minutes and rambles into his little thing.
Also, like, he apparently still has these recordings like readily available on his computer or something, because he knows it's 24 minutes. That's fairly specific.
Yeah, and it makes his beliefs to himself clear. This is incredible. Just like rambling to yourself.
This is a heavily researched book. He has all these tapes still and listens to all of them before writing.
And speaking of just rambling to yourself for 24 minutes, he could have just like transcribed that and turned that into another chapter. Maybe he did.
It could very well be the source of these words, yeah.
Imagine talking to yourself for 24 minutes. That is so long.
This is like
to just like
Hunter S. Thompson kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Gonzo journalism.
FBI agent Dale Cooper, Twin Peaks. Just driving around with a tape recorder. So after he had this meeting with Joni Ernst, the next day is when Randy Feenstra announced his primary campaign against him. So clearly Ernst was actually part of this plot against him, because otherwise, why would Feenstra announce so quickly afterwards? And he notes that Randy Feenstra announced on Twitter that he was going to primary him. As if, like, Twitter? That's how you announce your campaign? As if the previous paragraph was not about how the president tweeting something could have ruined him.
Right. Yeah, I love how he says it twice, and the second time it's in, like, italics with a question mark.
Yeah.
You mentioned Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
My can I go off on a tangent here quickly?
I'd love you to.
I just remembered this. So in I read the comments to my book review on Liz's Substack, and my favorite one was probably this one from Phil. It says, "Walking through the fire sounds eerily similar to David Lynch's Twin Peaks prequel, Fire Walk With Me."
Yeah.
A phrase Lynch has said is another way of saying, "I'm going to drag you down to the depths of hell." Presumably Steve King knows a shortcut.
And then after Feenstra has announced is when he starts talking about the Trip Gabriel interview.
Yeah.
He went into this kind of unprepared. Like he was thinking of this as an opportunity to prove that he was a productive member of Congress, because a lot of the 2018 campaign ads against him were like, he's a dipshit, he can't do anything in Congress, he's worthless.
That'd be a great ad. Just like, look at this fucking dipshit right here. Don't vote for him.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to say something about this, because I do think that Steve King does have a point. I mean, there's always been this thing about Steve King. Like, the only thing he's ever done is like named a post office or something, right?
Which they say about basically
like legislation he's gotten passed.
Every member of Congress, they basically throw that at.
And Steve King was, I think, quite influential in killing comprehensive immigration reform. Like, he played a key role in that during the Obama administration. And so I do think that, not in a good way, but I think unfortunately he was more effective than people give him credit for. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think he's right that he like influenced Trump's immigration platform. I think it's like, and wasn't the criticism of him like basically like he's not able to support Trump well enough because he's like, like the criticisms of him being incompetent were not like, and he should be more left or something. They were like, he needs to be a better ally for President Trump by like...
Well, yeah, and he argued that specifically after he got kicked off his committee assignments, because during the impeachment proceedings, he was on the House Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
And he was saying that like he could have been like a defender of Trump in those proceedings, but he lost his ability to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was basically the Feenstra campaign was like, this guy lost all his committee assignments. Elect me, and I can really do what he was trying to do.
Another thing Steve King's right about is Dave Kochel is a piece of shit. One of many people who's blocked me on Twitter, so I take it personally.
Yeah.
But he also like he was like showboated so much after Feenstra won, like took credit for it, and it's total bullshit. I mean, like Steve King, like did himself in. JD Schulten like put like the finishing blow basically on him, and then Feenstra. I mean, he kind of was just an off the shelf Republican. I mean, in a way, like he just
that's like that was his asset. Is like, this is just some guy. He's not like the infamous Steve King.
Yeah.
Steve King, of course, like misses a lot of like the context there, but
that's the impression I got, is he was just like a business guy, and like, isn't it going to be great that this is just some dude and he won't be embarrassing too?
Yeah, and like Feenstra never condemned Steve King for his white nationalist statements or anything. Racism never even came up in the primary. I wrote about this, and all that Feenstra said was like Steve King's caustic rhetoric was a problem for the party. And that's like as far as he went.
Yeah.
So Randy Feenstra is just like another severely conservative guy who's like smart enough to like not say like openly like racist shit all the time.
Less of a liability, but just as much of an ideologue.
Probably reads less like Nazi history, but
true.
It's still really fucking funny that he lost, though. So,
sure, yeah,
to be clear.
So the Trip Gabriel interview almost didn't happen. John Kennedy is the name of Steve King's communications director at the time. And Trip Gabriel was reaching out to Steve, trying to get an interview. And Steve tried to pass this by his communications director. But Steve King was taking a shower when John Kennedy texted him back saying, "I think it's a trap. He's out to get you." And so
it's a trap.
Steve King just jumps out of the shower and immediately takes the interview without checking his messages.
Those little details are so great. Like there are some really good moments like that. Well, if he's like naked when he's giving the interview, he's like dripping wet, like talking to Trip Gabriel.
He took a little too long in the shower, and then when he gets out, he sees on his clock radio, "Oh, it's 8:29. I have that interview in 1 minute." Again, he makes multiple references to there not being a recording of this interview, so you can't prove that he said any of this.
It's such a great part of like how like specifically dissects it while also saying like Trip Gabriel can't possibly know all these details because it was never recorded, but let me tell you this like play-by-play of the interview. It's like the final 3 pages of this chapter are all just him ranting about Chip Gabriel, which is how we got to a 13 count for this chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are so many quotes. He just has an issue with every single word that...
Mm-hmm. It's not fair that they said that he's anti-immigrant. They should have said anti-illegal immigrant.
No, illegal alien.
Illegal alien is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which he says illegal alien is the legal and correct term.
It is a legal term. I think that's correct. There's so many times when he goes back to this. I was looking for something that's really funny, but I think it's later in the book. But it's just... It's hard to keep straight.
Yeah.
What are you gonna say? Sorry.
No. He just like takes issue with like the way that he's quoted. He doesn't really like. He doesn't deny that he said the things that he's quoted as saying. He just thinks that they're being like presented in a worse light than they should have been.
And then get this where he goes like, "Hey, look at this," as if it's like self-evident that you just got like screwed over.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we just said, where any fair-minded journalist would have used illegal immigrant. The AP style book says specifically to use the term undocumented immigrant. So no fair-minded journalists would do that because they would follow like ethical journalistic practices and standards. So but Steve King sure thinks he knows a lot about journalism.
Yeah. Well, again, the AP style guide has bent the knee to woke cancel culture leftists.
Yeah.
Alinskyite cultural Marxists.
Right, I'd have a cultural Marxism once that's true. Another thing here. What do you got?
Probably going to talk about the same thing.
The British fellow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I don't think he says his name, but that's Mark Collette, who is a self-avowed Hitler admirer and like British neo-Nazi.
Yes.
And the timeline on this is a little unclear. Where he says, I had no idea who the guy was. I'm not sure if he means like he was saying that at the time of the interview, or just like when he initially tweeted him. But either way, it's bullshit because he first retweeted Mark Collette in May of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
There are articles about it, including from probably the Iowa Informer.
Yeah.
I definitely wrote about it because I went back to like get these dates. I wrote about it definitely after the second time he did it a month later. And that might have been the Breitbart article he's talking about. I can't remember which was which, but that was in June. And then there was national news about that. Like on Capitol Hill, like a bunch of reporters were talking to him. And the Huffington Post asked him, like, hey, Mark Collette, he's like this guy who's like this neo-Nazi. He was in a documentary like in the early 2000s. I mean, it's like this guy's a notorious like British like extremist. And it's like Steve King, like this is where he tweeted this too, but he quotes himself saying this in the book. It's the message, not the messenger. And I also quoted that in the book review because I think it's really funny. And so like just clueless, you know, like but like he had every reason to like know what this guy was about. And if he didn't, it's like no one's fault but his own because it's like. But then he seems by that quote by saying like it doesn't even matter anyway, you know, because his message was that who gives a shit.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you know, Hitler had some good points, kind of like that, you know, almost like.
Yeah. Mark Collette, I can't remember this for sure, but I think he came up in Republican Crackhead also. So that's somebody that Todd is aware of. Okay, yeah. I think.
I can't remember.
Yeah, there was at least some discussion of British neo-Nazis in that book as well.
There's a few of them.
But he says here, so whatever the guy's background, he at least never served as the exalted Cyclops, if anything. Robert Byrd, remember?
He just didn't. He might be a Nazi, but at least he was never in the Klan.
Yeah, like what the
That's a great argument.
Yeah.
I think that's a lateral move.
Yeah.
So Mark Collette, he was the chairman of the British National Party Youth Wing, which is really not much different from being the exalted Cyclops of your local KKK chapter.
It's like a straight like fascist party.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
It looks pretty horrific. I'd never heard of this guy, so I just looked him up, and it's
unambiguous. Ugh. Yeah, he's like totally a Nazi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, how did Steve King see the tweet in the first place? I'm pretty sure he followed him, which means like he'd heard about him somewhere, which means like even if he didn't know who he was reading other people who are like-minded, which is like, you know.
Right, yeah.
That might mean something.
He's plugged into those kind of circles.
Oh my God. This is the worst man I've ever seen.
The documentary, I can't remember the details, but I think he called like, I don't remember. He was like surreptitiously recorded, I think, and it was like he said some real nasty shit about like homosexuality and like, AIDS and.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say it because it's too bad. I am not comfortable, but it's horrific.
Yeah. Anyway, it's the message, not the messenger.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ. Ugh.
Well, that's kind of how chapter 2 ends, is like in the middle of being interviewed by Trip Gabriel. And the subsequent uproar. Do we have anything else we need to cover there?
I don't know. That might be a good place to end it. You know, it makes you feel, you know, like Natalie's reaction. Very evocative book.
Yeah.
I still can't stop thinking about him standing like soaking wet, naked on the phone with Gabriel, just like rushing out of the shower.
Former Sunday Styles editor. Never forget that. So next time we're going to read through chapter 6. I certainly will be reading through chapter 6. I can't make any promises about anyone else reading.
I promise.
I've already read it and listened to the audio, but I'll go back through it again.
No, I'll really read it. I read this section while you guys were talking. I did the reading for this one.
I saw your head down looking.
I did. I read it. So I'm all up to date.
Everyone will enjoy listening to you read that. All right. Well, thank you, Gavin.
What are you going to call this?
Oh, I'm going to call this Different Book Club Walking Through the Fire, number 1.
Okay. All right.
Did you have another title in mind?
No, that sounds great.
Okay.
And thank you, both of you, for doing this, because this will be I don't know if fun's the right word, but it'll be a journey.
Yeah, I've been excited to start on this for months now, so I'm glad we're finally doing it.
Yeah.
Diane, 11:30 a.m., February 24th. Entering the town of Twin Peaks. It's 5 miles south of the Canadian border, 12 miles west of the state line. I've never seen so many trees in my life. As W.C. Fields would say, I'd rather be here than Philadelphia. 54 degrees on a slightly overcast day. Weatherman said rain. You could get paid that kind of money for being wrong 60% of the time. You'd be working. The mileage is 79,345. Gauge is on reserve. Riding on fumes here. I got to tank up when I get into town. Remind me to tell you how much that is. Lunch was $6.31 at the Lamplighter Inn. That's on Highway 2 near Lewis Fork. That was tuna fish sandwich on whole wheat, slice of cherry pie, and a cup of coffee. Damn good food. Diane, if you ever get up this way, that cherry pie is worth a stop. Okay. Looks like I'll be meeting up with the Sheriff Harry S. Truman. Shouldn't be too hard to remember that. We'll be at the Calhoun Memorial Hospital. Guess we're going to go up to intensive care and take a look at that girl that crawled down the railroad tracks off the mountain. When I finish here, I'll be checking into a motel. I'm sure the sheriff will be able to recommend a clean place, reasonably priced. That's what I need. A clean place, reasonably priced. Oh, Diane, I almost forgot. Got to find out what kind of